They said the black waitress stole the bracelet, but her secret shocked everyone. Someone call the police right now, because this thief just stole my diamond bracelet, and I watched her do it with my own eyes. The words exploded through the elegant dining room of the Golden Oak restaurant in Atlanta like a bomb going off, shattering the peaceful Sunday brunch atmosphere and freezing every single person in place as heads turned toward the source of the commotion. Maya Williams stood perfectly still, her dark brown hands still holding the pot of fresh coffee she had been about to pour, her heart hammering so hard against her chest that she was certain everyone in the room could hear it pounding. The woman screaming was Victoria Sterling, a regular customer who came in every Sunday after church wearing her finest clothes and her most expensive jewelry, always requesting the same corner booth, always treating Maya like she was invisible or worse. Victoria was standing now, her chair knocked backward, her finger pointed directly at Maya's face like a weapon, her voice rising higher with each word as she described the bracelet that had supposedly vanished from her wrist. The other customers were staring, some with shock, some with something darker in their eyes. That look Maya had seen too many times in her 28 years of living in a world that often decided her guilt before hearing her story. Maya's manager, a thin man named Gerald, who always smiled at wealthy customers and frowned at his staff, rushed over with panic written across his pale face as he tried to calm the situation while simultaneously shooting accusatory glances at Maya. "Mrs. Sterling, please, let's not cause a scene," he said. But his words were weak and his body was already positioning itself between Maya and the exit like he expected her to run. Victoria Sterling was not interested in being calmed down, her perfectly styled silver hair trembling with rage as she demanded that someone search Maya immediately, that someone check her pockets and her apron and whatever hole she was planning to hide the stolen treasure in. The other servers had stopped working, their faces a mixture of sympathy and relief that it wasn't them standing in Maya's shoes, their silence a betrayal that cut deeper than Victoria's accusations. Maya thought about her grandmother, who had worked in restaurants like this 150 years ago, who had told her stories about being accused of things she never did simply because of the color of her skin, who had warned her that some things in America changed slower than others. The restaurant fell into chaos as Gerald demanded that Maya empty her pockets while Victoria continued her performance for the watching crowd, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief while describing the sentimental value of the bracelet her late mother had supposedly given her on her wedding day. Maya placed the coffee pot down with trembling hands, not because she was guilty, but because she was tired. So incredibly tired of standing in moments like this one, of having her character questioned by people who had never bothered to learn her name. She pulled out the contents of her apron pocket one by one, laying them on the nearest table for everyone to see. Her order pad and her pen and her tips from the morning and a photograph of her daughter that she carried everywhere. There was no bracelet, of course, because Maya had never touched Victoria Sterling's jewelry, had never done anything except serve this woman with professionalism and grace despite the snide comments and the poor tips and the way Victoria always wiped her silverware with her napkin after Maya set it down. But the absence of evidence did not seem to matter to Victoria, who was now insisting that Maya must have hidden it somewhere, must have passed it to an accomplice, must have found some clever way to steal from good honest people. Gerald was on the phone with the police, his voice hushed but urgent, while Victoria's husband Richard sat at their table looking uncomfortable but saying nothing to defend the woman his wife was destroying with her lies. Maya noticed him glancing at his wife with an expression she couldn't quite read, something that looked almost like guilt mixed with resignation, and she filed that observation away in her mind for later. The other customers had returned to their meals, but kept stealing glances at the scene, their conversations now whispered, their eyes hungry for drama that would give them something to talk about at their own dinner parties. Maya stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by people, but completely isolated, feeling the weight of every assumption being made about her, every story being written in the minds of strangers who had already decided she was guilty. She thought about her daughter Lily, only 7 years old, waiting at home with Maya's mother, probably watching cartoons and having no idea that her mama was standing in a restaurant being accused of a crime she didn't commit. She thought about all the sacrifices she had made, all the secrets she had kept, all the reasons she had for working in this place that treated her like she was worth less than the silverware she polished every morning. The police arrived within 15 minutes. To officers who listened to Victoria's tearful account while barely glancing at Maya, their notepads out and their faces arranged in expressions of professional concern that seemed to lean heavily in Victoria's direction. Maya answered their questions calmly and clearly, explaining that she had served the Sterling table 3 times that morning, that she had never gotten close enough to touch Mrs. Sterling's jewelry, that she had been working at the Golden Oak for 2 years without a single complaint against her record. The officers searched her more thoroughly than Gerald had, their hands patting down her uniform while the restaurant watched, the humiliation burning in Maya's chest like a fire she was struggling to contain. Victoria kept interrupting with new details, new accusations, new reasons why Maya must be guilty, her voice dripping with the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of being believed without question. Richard Sterling finally spoke up, suggesting quietly that perhaps the bracelet had simply fallen off somewhere, that perhaps they should check under the table or in the restroom. But Victoria silenced him with a look that could have frozen water. The officers found nothing on Maya, but explained that they would need to take her to the station for further questioning, that a complaint had been filed and procedures had to be followed, that she could call a lawyer if she wanted one. Maya was placed in the back of the police car while the restaurant customers watched through the windows. Her hands not cuffed, but her dignity certainly shattered as she sat where so many innocent people had sat before her. She thought about her secret, the truth she had kept hidden from everyone at the Golden Oak, the life she lived outside these walls that none of them could possibly imagine. She thought about whether this was the moment to reveal everything, to show these people who she really was, to watch their faces change when they understood how wrong they had been about her. But something held her back, some instinct that told her the truth would be more powerful if it emerged at the right moment, if it caught them completely off guard, if it exposed not just their mistake, but the deeper ugliness that had made their mistake possible. The drive to the station took 20 minutes, and Maya spent every one of those minutes thinking about her grandmother, about her daughter, about the promise she had made herself years ago, that she would never let people like Victoria Sterling make her feel small. The officers at the station were neither kind nor cruel, just efficient, processing her like she was a number rather than a person, asking her the same questions she had already answered while typing her responses into computers that hummed with indifference. They let Maya make her phone call, and she dialed a number that made the officer watching her raise his eyebrows in surprise when the person on the other end answered with a name that clearly meant something. Within an hour, a lawyer walked into the station, not a public defender, but a partner from one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms, a tall black man in a suit that cost more than most people made in a month. His name was Marcus Chen Williams, and when he sat down across from the officers handling Maya's case, the energy in the room shifted like someone had opened a window and let fresh air rush in. "I'm here representing Ms. Williams," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that demanded attention. "And I'd like to know on what evidence you're holding my client, because from what I understand, no stolen property was found in her possession, and the only testimony against her comes from a single witness with no corroboration." The officers exchanged glances, their confidence suddenly seeming less certain, their paperwork suddenly seeming less complete. Maya watched Marcus work with a small smile on her face, knowing that the situation was about to change dramatically, knowing that Victoria Sterling had made a terrible mistake by choosing Maya Williams as her target. The truth that Maya had hidden from her co-workers at the Golden Oak was about to come into the light, and it was bigger than anyone could have imagined. Maya Williams was not just a waitress working for tips and struggling to make ends meet, though that was the story she had carefully constructed over the past 2 years. In her other life, the life she lived when she wasn't wearing an apron and serving brunch to wealthy Atlantans, Maya was the founder and CEO of the Williams Foundation, a nonprofit organization that had given away over $12 million in scholarships, medical bill assistance, and emergency aid to families across Georgia. She had started the foundation with money she inherited from her father, a man who had built a construction empire from nothing and who had taught Maya that true wealth was measured not by what you kept, but by what you gave away. Maya had chosen to work as a waitress because she wanted to understand the lives of the people her foundation served, wanted to feel the weight of standing on your feet for 8 hours, wanted to never forget where her family had come from. She had kept her identity secret because she knew that people treated you differently when they thought you had nothing, and she wanted to see the truth of how restaurants treated their workers, how customers treated those who served them, how power moved through spaces where some people held all the cards and others held none. But there was an even bigger secret, one that connected Maya directly to the woman who had just accused her of theft 3 years ago. Victoria Sterling's granddaughter Emma had been diagnosed with a rare blood disorder that required expensive treatments not covered by insurance. Treatments that cost thousands of dollars each month and threatened to bankrupt even a wealthy family like the Sterlings. Victoria had been too proud to ask for help publicly, too concerned about appearances to admit that her family was struggling, so she had applied quietly to several charitable foundations hoping for assistance. The Williams Foundation had approved her application, and for the past 3 years, Maya had been personally authorizing the payments that kept little Emma alive, writing checks from an account that Victoria would never connect to the black waitress she treated like dirt every Sunday morning. Maya had watched Victoria come into the Golden Oak week after week, had served her eggs and coffee and fresh squeezed orange juice, had listened to her complaints and absorbed her cruelty, knowing the whole time that she was the reason Emma Sterling was still breathing. She had never said anything because the help wasn't about recognition, wasn't about gratitude, was simply about a little girl who deserved to live regardless of how terrible her grandmother might be. The investigation into Maya's case moved quickly once Marcus got involved, and what the police discovered in the next 48 hours turned the entire situation upside down in ways that nobody expected. Security footage from the Golden Oak showed clearly that Maya had never gotten close enough to Victoria's wrist to take anything, that she had maintained professional distance with every interaction, that the bracelet had been on Victoria's arm at the start of brunch and still there when she went to the restroom. But the footage also showed something else, something that made the officers watching it lean forward with sudden interest, something that explained why Richard Sterling had looked so guilty when his wife was screaming accusations. The video captured Richard slipping the bracelet off his wife's wrist when she was distracted by her phone, pocketing it smoothly with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before, his face betraying no emotion as he stole from his own wife. Further investigation revealed that Richard Sterling had a gambling problem that had spiraled out of control, that he had already sold several pieces of Victoria's jewelry to pay his debts, that he had been planning to blame this latest theft on the waitress because he knew his wife's prejudices would make her an easy target. The story broke across Atlanta like a summer storm, newspaper headlines and social media posts spreading the truth about what had really happened at the Golden Oak. Victoria Sterling was photographed outside her home refusing to comment, her perfect composure finally cracked, her reputation crumbling under the weight of her husband's crimes and her own rush to judgment. Richard was arrested for insurance fraud, theft, and filing a false police report, his mugshot appearing on every local news channel, while commentators discussed the irony of a wealthy white man framing an innocent black woman for his own crimes. But the biggest shock was still coming, and it arrived when an investigative reporter dug deep enough into Maya's background to discover the connection between the accused waitress and the Williams Foundation, between the woman Victoria had tried to destroy and the anonymous donor who had been keeping Emma Sterling alive. The reporter contacted Maya for comment, and Maya decided that the time for secrets was over, that the truth deserved to be told, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do show people exactly how wrong they were about you. Maya's press conference was held on the steps of the Williams Foundation headquarters. a beautiful building in downtown Atlanta that served as a hub for all the charitable work she had been doing for the past 7 years. She stood at the podium in a simple dress, no longer wearing her waitress uniform, but still carrying herself with the same quiet dignity she had shown when Victoria Sterling pointed her finger and called her a thief. The cameras flashed and the reporters shouted questions, but Maya waited until they were silent before she spoke, her voice clear and steady as she told her story from the beginning. She talked about her father, who had come to Atlanta with nothing and built everything, who had taught her that you should never let money make you forget what it feels like to have none. She talked about working at the Golden Oak, about the lessons she learned there, about how people treat those they consider beneath them, about the small cruelties she witnessed daily that never made the news but shaped lives nonetheless. And then she talked about Emma Sterling, about the little girl she had never met but whose medical bills she had paid for 3 years, about the grandmother who received help from Maya's foundation while treating Maya herself like a criminal waiting to happen. The footage of Victoria Sterling watching Maya's press conference became one of the most shared videos in Atlanta that week, her face cycling through disbelief to shock to shame as she learned the truth about the woman she had accused. Reporters captured the moment when Victoria realized that the waitress she had looked down on, the woman she had tried to send to prison, was the same person who had been paying for her granddaughter's life-saving treatments. Victoria collapsed into a chair, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her actions crashed down upon her. She requested a meeting with Maya through the foundation's office, and Maya agreed to see her because forgiveness was what her father had taught her, because holding onto anger only poisons the person carrying it, because she wanted to show her daughter Lily that grace was more powerful than revenge. The meeting took place in Maya's office, just the two women facing each other across a desk covered with thank you letters from families the foundation had helped, the silence between them thick with everything that had happened and everything that still needed to be said. Victoria Sterling began with tears, her apology coming out in broken pieces as she struggled to find words big enough for what she had done. She talked about her assumptions, about the stories she had told herself about black people in service jobs, about the way she had learned to see the world from parents who had seen it the same way. She did not make excuses, did not try to justify her behavior, simply acknowledged that she had been wrong in ways she was only beginning to understand. Maya listened without interrupting, watching this woman who had seemed so powerful in the restaurant, now small and broken in the chair across from her, seeing not a villain but a person shaped by prejudices she had never been taught to question. When Victoria finished, Maya told her about her grandmother, about the restaurants where she had worked decades ago, about the accusations she had faced and survived, about the strength she had passed down through generations that could not be stolen by people who underestimated it. She told Victoria that forgiveness was possible but change was required, that sorry was just a word unless it was followed by action, that the real apology would be measured in how Victoria lived the rest of her life. 6 months later, Victoria Sterling stood at a podium of her own, speaking at a fundraising gala for the Williams Foundation, her voice trembling but determined as she told a room full of Atlanta's wealthy citizens about the day she learned how wrong she had been about everything. She had become an unlikely advocate for the foundation's work, donating generously and volunteering regularly, her transformation genuine even if it had required humiliation to spark it. Little Emma was in the audience, healthy and laughing, running between tables while her grandmother spoke about the woman who had saved her life while serving her breakfast. Maya watched from the back of the room, holding her daughter Lily's hand, feeling the strange and wonderful closing of a circle she never expected to complete. Richard Sterling was serving time for his crimes. The marriage dissolved, but Victoria had rebuilt herself into someone her younger self would not have recognized. The Golden Oak had issued a public apology to Maya and implemented new training programs for addressing customer complaints, small changes that might protect the next person from standing where Maya had stood. Maya returned to the foundation full-time after that, no longer hiding her identity, no longer dividing herself between two worlds that had finally merged into one. She established a new program specifically for service workers facing workplace discrimination, providing legal help and emergency funds for people like the waitress she had pretended to be for 2 years. Her story was taught in business schools and discussed on talk shows, not as a tale of revenge, but as an example of how hidden goodness can flourish even in hostile soil. Maya's grandmother, now 92 years old, came to the foundation's office one afternoon to see where her granddaughter worked, her eyes filling with tears as she read the letters on the wall from families who had been helped. She held Maya's hand and told her that this was what she had marched for, what she had hoped for, what she had dreamed about on those long nights when progress seemed impossible. Maya thought about all the paths that had led to this moment, all the choices she had made, all the secrets she had kept and revealed, and she understood finally why her father had taught her to give rather than keep, to serve rather than demand service, to see the humanity in everyone even when they could not see hers. The truth we hide about ourselves often becomes our greatest power when we finally choose to reveal it, because who we really are matters infinitely more than who others assume us to be.